Kia ora, and welcome. Haere mai, namaste, talofa. Fucking how you doing? Welcome to today's episode of The Niche Cast, and it's a pretty damn funky one, if I can say so myself. This weekend, we got the big old UFC fight, Israel Adesanya rematch against Robert Whittaker. We got Blood Diamond, Mike Mathetha making his UFC debut. We got Carlos Ulberg in his second UFC fight as well. So we're going to go deep into UFC 271 because three old Kiwis just battling away in the best fighting competition in the world. Pretty cool. We got some Wellington Phoenix update yarns as well because they're tracking along quite nicely. Wildcard has been super positive on the wahine developing, and now we've got the annual tradition of the Wellington Phoenix being ho-hum to start the season and building into their mahi nicely. And we got some quick little notes to start the podcast as well. So it's going to be a fun podcast, I believe. Of course, big it up to all our Patreon whānau. And if you enjoy the Niche Case, if you like what we're doing here, broadcasting Aotearoa sporting excellence, join the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/EL Niche Case, L Niche Case, and join the Patreon whānau. It's just a beautiful support system, a support network. And every Monday or Tuesday, we deliver a big old podcast for the Patreon whānau as well. So shout out to all our Patreon whānau. And that is the best way to support the Niche Case right now. So if you do like what we're doing, head on over to patreon.com/EL Niche Case. Today's Thursday, so tomorrow is Friday, which means it's an email banger day. Monday and Friday, probably the best Aotearoa sporting yarns delivered to your email inbox, I'd say. None of the other fucking weirdos are doing that shit, but we're doing that shit. And we go pretty hard with the email banger, extra yarns, and all the regular Niche Case content delivered straight to your email inbox. So you might listen to this podcast via the email, or you might click through to the big old Israel Adesanya Robert Whittaker preview. You might click through to read something else. You might just tune in, tap in, and get the bonus Kiwi sporting yarns via the email banger. thenichecase.substack.com. Enter your email address. Niche Case comes directly to you. And of course, we do our deep dives. We do our serious mahi on the website, theniche-case.com. And that's where just check in every couple of days. You'll find a yarn. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook to see the updates, the new yarns, but also just check in. Maybe every second day, maybe every day, maybe every third day, maybe just only on Wednesdays, however the fuck you want to do it. Head on over to theniche-case.com and get your Aotearoa sporting fix. We always start our podcast with a dose of mindfulness. Now, this is for our own well-being, our own benefit. You know, we're all about the Shoshin mindset here at the Niche Case and the Niche Cast, all about growth, development, and mindfulness. It's just a beautiful thing to help us survive in the current world. And as always, we always try to make it practical and applicable for you and I, the listener. Wobbly Wildcard from your humble abode in the northern extremities of Aotearoa, where the souls leave Cape Reinga to go back to Hawaii. Can you channel that mindfulness from that region of Aotearoa and share with us? Hopefully something really fucking smart. Let's go.
Not quite that far north, but close enough. Far enough north that it's just like part of the what do you call it? The northern North Islands just muggy epidemic that's going on at the moment. It's even made the news. I'm assuming it's as bad for you there in Auckland as it is in Whangarei.
Yeah, it's very moist. It's very moist, but like
Moist, yeah.
Whangarei is like a, you know, the last dairy before the beach type of thing.
Yeah.
Like if all the souls of the beautiful Māori folk and anyone else who believes in Aotearoa spirituality, they're trekking north after their death. They're heading north. It's the Winterfell to the wall. That's what it is. Before going to the wall, you got to check in at Winterfell.
The last outpost.
There you go. The last outpost before you go to the wall. And I would imagine they are very different journeys. Once someone goes beyond the wall and then someone ventures from Cape Reinga to Hawaii, very different journeys, but a similar premise.
Yeah, I think the dead people move in opposite directions in those two examples, I think is the main difference. Let's dip into some Lao Tzu Tao Te Ching. This is from chapter 11. There's more to it, but I'll pick the best aspect of it, which is we mold clay into a pot, but it's the emptiness inside that makes the vessel useful. Make of that what you will.
I've got this, I don't know if these are related, but there's this other idea where, like, if you put sand in a jar and then you put rocks on top of the sand, you don't get as much shit in the jar. But if you put the rocks in the jar and then you put the sand in afterwards, then you fit more shit into the jar, because the rocks like fill up the thing and then the sand just falls into all the nooks and crevices. So that came to mind, but I don't think that actually has any relation to it, or is I'm trying to link the two, but I can't. It's just a good idea. The emptiness of the vessel. That's like the drum. One of my oracle cards is the drum, and it's so important because it gives you music, it gives you vibration from emptiness. Like you get sound by hitting a drum, and the drum is empty. So there's like energy in the emptiness, which hopefully you can jump in here, and then I can also think about how to ground this and apply some practicality to it, because I'm struggling right now. But that also comes to mind. Like there's great energy in the emptiness. There's power in the emptiness, as evident in a drum, and also, a clay, whatever the fuck.
Yeah, there's potential in the emptiness, isn't there? Like it's not a thing yet, but the emptiness is what allows you to do things with that space, and put rocks or sand in your jar or whatever. That's actually something that they said, because you get plant pots that have like the little saucer at the bottom and there are holes in the bottom so the water can leak through, right? So it's not just sitting there soaking in the soil and drowning the thing. Then you also get plant pots that don't have that. And I killed a plant the other way. I didn't kill it. I say it like that, and it makes me sound like I pulled out a knife or something like that and just started stabbing. But a plant that I was trying to grow died pretty much because of root rot, because it was sitting in a pot where it wasn't draining well enough. And one of the things they said to solve that, coincidentally, was to put like a layer, like an inch or two of rocks or sand or pebbles or whatever at the bottom below the dirt, so that dirt sits on top of that, but the excess water will sit and drain into where the stones are, rather than being connected with the dirt. I'm not sure how that's maybe that's just an extremely practical version spinning off of something that we're talking about here. But yeah, there is a little bit more to that chapter. Like the next paragraph says, we fashion wood for a house, but it's the emptiness inside that makes it livable. And then at the end it's like, we work with the substantial, but the emptiness is what we use. I don't know if that clears it up anymore. I found it kind of more evocative than I did like revelatory, but I think there's definitely something in that.
So to concentrate on the practicality and the grounding of it, we as humans, I think there's great insight, there's great wisdom, there's great energy. What'd you say, like
potential? Was it
potential? Yeah. The potential of emptiness. So as individuals, as humans, we need to find that emptiness. That's why meditation is important, because what are you doing? You are emptying yourself. You're emptying yourself of all your thoughts and all the stress and all the pain and the trauma and all that shit. Every time you meditate, you catch yourself thinking, bring it back to mindfulness, and then you're empty. And that's just the process of emptying yourself out. So I think for us as humans to get into our potential, to get into what is possible, to really understand ourselves, to do everything as a human being, I think you need to embrace that emptiness. So taking it a step further and grounding it in practicality here, day to day, there's a lot of shit happening. Like, no matter who you are, whether you're at school, whether you're a parent, whether you're just working, everything's happening. Your mind is always happening. It's working overdrive, let alone all the other bullkaka you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So if you can find a little bit in your day to empty yourself, whether that might be fasting even, because you're emptying your body, you're emptying your systems, you're relaxing your systems. So, but then from a mindset, day to day, just find some time to empty yourself, because in that emptiness comes the potential, comes the opportunity, comes the insight and the understanding. Boom.
Which is sort of taking us down down the line, like down the tracks towards the moral of the story, which is like it's not what you're working with, it's what you do with it, sort of thing.
Correct. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to segue from our introductory mindfulness into sporting mindfulness here, because we've got some quick hitters to work through. And first on my list here is some positive white ferns and blackcaps ideas. Obviously, we've been deep in white ferns woes, and there's a lot of negativity around there. So I have to challenge myself to come up with a positive thing, like a positive angle, positive mindset. Part of that is going deeper into Halliburton Johnston Shield cricket and celebrating the domestic cricket, because there's immense positivity there. Also, the White Ferns are actually pretty good at T20 cricket. So since the start of 2019, they are 3-20 in ODI cricket, and there is an ODI World Cup at the end of the summer. That's the issue. In T20 cricket, since the start of 2019, the White Ferns are 12-11. So they're actually quite good at T20 cricket, and they defeated India yesterday in one T20 international. So shout out to the T20 White Ferns. It's a fantastic thing. They've got a winning record since the start of 2019, and they won a T20 game yesterday. So big it up to them, and there's no more T20 games coming up. Blackcaps, we went deep in on the Patreon podcast Wildcard about the Blackcaps, and we talked, we got pretty weird, we got pretty in depth. So shout out to the Patreon podcast. That's why you should listen to it. In thinking how I can grow and how I can put a positive twist on it, if the Blackcaps win 1-0, if the Blackcaps win 2-0, that is fucking amazing. Because then we've got like this kind of semi-B squad, test squad, that is capable of winning a test series. And that seems ridiculous, but it also seems completely in alignment with the depth of Aotearoa cricket. So you can pick apart the test squad. Yeah, no Kane Williamson, no Trent Bolt, Ross Taylor's retired, and there's all these and the World Test Championship cycle hasn't quite been as productive so far as we would have hoped. But there's a great opportunity for this Blackcaps test squad to win tests in Aotearoa without their best players and really showcase Aotearoa's cricketing depth. I've got one more note here, wildcard, and this is a deep cut. This is a deep cut Kiwi-NRL note. End of last year, I highlighted how two Otahuhu juniors are signed to the Cronulla Sharks. We got Samisi Sakei and Salesi Ataata. Sakei had been with the Sharks for a couple of years, and Salesi Ataata joined the Sharks this year. Both of them Otahuhu juniors, both are with Cronulla Sharks. Also, both played footy prior to going to the Sharks against grown men in Aotearoa. Samisi Sakei started on the wing for Counties Manukau in the National Premiership, and then SG Ball starts the next year, and Samisi Sakei is starting at prop in SG Ball. Same thing with Salesi Ataata. Last year, Salesi Ataata was starting at centre for the Otahuhu Premier team. Then he goes to under 19 SG Ball with the Cronulla Sharks, where he is starting at prop. So not only do we have two Otahuhu juniors with Cronulla Sharks who played against grown men prior to going to the Sharks, both of them played against grown men as outside backs and are now starting, both of them have started as middle forwards in their age group footy over in Australia. We have Samisi Sakei might play under 21s this year. or he might step up to reserve grade. Salesi Ataata has started the season with SG Ball. So that's just a funky wrinkle there. And we got one more. Alex Grieve has been top of the Flying Kiwis billing for a couple of weeks now, Wildcard. I had no idea who he was. And then he popped up on our Twitter feed via yourself and your mahi. What's happening with Alex Grieve just quickly?
Yeah, I wanted to give him a shout on the podcast too. We're rolling through these at the start because he he didn't quite come out of nowhere. Like he had a pretty sort of esteemed university career playing for it was Northern Kentucky, I think. I'd have to double check that in America, where he was probably unlucky not to be drafted, to be honest. But we've gone through a couple of these examples, particularly in some of them playing Kiwis and the transfer trackers and the emails and stuff, where I've sort of come to a point of complete skepticism when it comes to the MLS and WSL draft scenarios. So we'll forget about that and just assume that they're going to overlook good Kiwi players. So he had a season with Waitakere in the last premiership where he was excellent for a team that was pretty leaky at the back. So it sort of overshadowed, but he was like an excellent creative attacking player for them. And clearly one of the half a dozen best talents in that competition. Didn't get to play South Central Series, obviously, because he plays for Birkenhead and Northern clubs, Northern League clubs, when part of the South Central Series. However, he was the MVP of the Northern League winter season. So tells you what you need to know about what he was doing there. Signs with St. Mirren, and it's just been a rapid rise ever since then. So, we've talked about this a little bit before in places, so people will know, like the St. Mirren transfer, Birkenhead to St. Mirren, comes about through like a little partnership that the two clubs set up, which normally those things are just kind of symbolic, don't lead to much. Here it's led to like one of the best Kiwi amateur players getting the overdue professional contract. And here's what he's done since then. So he was on trial with them for a little while. And that was sort of like an under the radar little thing, like gossipy thing that people knew about. But the transfer was actually confirmed 18th of January, 2022. Later that evening, he makes a Scottish Premiership debut off the bench in a 2-1 win over Dundee United. 26th of January, he's made a couple more appearances for St. Mirren by then, and he's called up to replace the unavailable Andre de Jong in the all-white squad for his first senior international call-up. 28th of January, I'm going by the European dates here rather than the NZ time dates, but just to keep it tidy, but just add a day to all of them otherwise. 28th of January, 2 days later, Alex Grieve makes his national team debut off the bench against Jordan. 5th of February, he's returned to St. Mirren now after international duty and immediately makes a starting debut in a 1-0 win over Hibernian. 9th of February, so this is this morning, Thursday morning, Kiwi time, as we recorded this. Like, we pushed back the recording half an hour so I could watch the end of this game, basically. Gets a second start, his first home start for St. Mirren. Wins a penalty in the first half for an equaliser. This is against St. Johnston. Scores the 49th minute winning goal, what ended up being a 2-1 victory. This was obviously his first goal for the club. Nice, right place, right time, tapping at the back stick, making a good run to get on the end of a really good cross. He was excellent throughout the game, I thought. Like, his hold-up play was really impressive for a guy who's like up against much more physical centre-backs, but he's, using his body really well, getting into good positions. Turning on these suckers, winning free kicks and stuff. Won, 4 or 5 fouls throughout the game. That was actually how he won the penalty, was like backing into a defender who just pushed through him and shoved him over. Penalty, there you go. And yeah, this just in the course of 3 weeks, he's just ticking off milestone after milestone after milestone after milestone. Good first goal this morning in a really fantastic first 90-minute performance as well. I don't really know what he's got next. I don't know what the next trick is. I don't know what the next milestone to tick off after this is. He'll get a chance for a first international goal in a couple months. Hopefully, I assume he's going to keep being picked for all white squads going like this. So I don't know, first hat trick next game or something. He's got another game on the weekend. And I think another a funky aspect of this to check out as well. Alex Grieve's 4 appearances for St. Mirren. Win. Like all 4 games he's played for them, they've won. They were not a team that was winning every game prior to his arrival. Like, this is a This is something that's changed in a hurry. It's not only him. They made a couple other, what do you call them, like January transfers, but he's definitely, I mean, he scored this morning, set up the first goal. So he's definitely playing a big part in it. Just the rapid rise of Alex Grieve. Had to highlight that one once more for the podcast.
When are these football Ferns games happening?
They are happening in pretty much a week's time. I think the 17th or the 18th is the first game.
Cool. So
and then there's 3 games in the space of a week. There's like 17th, 20th, 23rd, something along those lines. Effectively, sneaky little undercover aspect of that thing is 3 different teams, 3 solid, decent oppositions, but with a bit of variance there, because there's like, Iceland and Czech Republic are potentially winnable games. USA is not a potentially winnable game. It'll be a massive upset if they can do that. But like that variance in quality of opposition, the 3 games in 6 to 7 days, that kind of mimics a World Cup / Olympics group stage really nicely. So I think that's a really handy little aspect to keep in mind of that series.
Lovely jubbly. Let's crack into this UFC 271 event. And I've consistently stated, wildcard, my fascination and intrigue around the Adesanya UFC future. So this morning I had the intention today I was going to write about it. And obviously we're doing the podcast, and the Thursday podcast before a UFC event, we always preview the event. And I woke up and there was news that Adesanya had signed a new deal with the UFC. Who knows how many fights it is? Like, none of that information is public, but it does make everything very clear. Everything is crystal clear with Israel Adesanya, and I think this is actually, it's full of mana. It's coming from a bloke like Adesanya who has supreme control and supreme understanding of his tūranga waiwai, his standing point. Because all the intrigue and the fascination was when you put 2 different powerful forces against each other, or like coming into connection with each other, as Israel Adesanya, one of the biggest UFC stars, and the UFC business. Those are the 2 forces. What Adesanya has made clear in signing this UFC deal is that he just wants to like double down on who he is as a champion. He just wants to stay there, stay in the pocket, I think is a good way of saying it. Like, stay in the pocket and just fight off anyone who wants his, belt. That's all Israel Adesanya wants to do. It does come from a place of, like, outside the UFC, Israel Adesanya, and I've said this a few times, in the city kickboxing fighters, they do a great job with their own business ideas, their own finances, all these things. So they're not necessarily dependent on the big UFC money. And sure, Israel Adesanya's deal with the UFC is probably a big deal. Like, it's a good financial deal for Adesanya, but he doesn't need to go elsewhere to find the extra money, because he doesn't really want that extra money. Like, everything's kind of cool, and he just wants to establish his legacy in fighting the best fighters in the UFC. And that is quite admirable. That is quite, that's full of mana, where we've got our Aotearoa UFC champion is someone who isn't focused on the money. He's not worried about the money. He's not seeking out more money. No, Adesanya is just about fighting. And I think that is pretty damn cool. And especially when you think about maybe some perceptions that Aotearoa has about Israel Adesanya. Now, not the young folk necessarily, but some of these older folk, they look at Adesanya and they think, who's this fucking weirdo upstart kind of kid? Like, what's he doing? Like, he's just like all glitz and glam. No. Israel Adesanya has clearly laid out his future for an undisclosed period of time, an undisclosed number of fights, that he will stay true to his values. He will stay true to his morals, his ethics, and his martial arts mindset, which is you fight the best fighters. And if you're the champion, your duty is to defend your championship belt against the best fighters over and over and over again. That's how you become the greatest. That's how you become the best person you can be. That's how you become the best martial artist you can be. So that is a fresh development that doesn't like change my intrigue or fascination, but it does help me greater like understand Israel Adesanya better. And that's a message I want to make clear to the listeners, is that Israel Adesanya he basically had two routes ahead of him. He could go down the I want more money and creating an issue with the UFC, or the like, yeah, just it's just a different, like that's how other UFC fighters have approached that juncture, that fork in the road. Israel Adesanya's gone the other route, where he's just like sticking to his values, sticking to his morals, and what he wants to achieve as a man, as a bloke, as a martial artist. And I think that's really cool. I think that's it's fascinating, obviously, because it's Fascination Station, but it's also something we can learn about Adesanya. We can learn about city kickboxing through this decision from Adesanya, and also shout out Eugene Behrman, because he told Ariel Helwani that like he does a lot of work on the contracting side of things as well with the UFC. So that's a fresh development ahead of this Robert Whittaker fight. Do you got anything to add before we get into the nitty gritty of some of these fights?
Yeah, I guess because because we talked about this a bit on the variety show, and it was something that you'd mentioned in emails and stuff as well. And your fascination led to my fascination for this thing. Like you sold me on that. And it seemed like the alternatives, if you're not going to take up a UFC thing, is to end up going into like the most money he could make probably right now would be to fight like boxing exhibitions and stuff. It seems to be what others doing. But then also a point that you made is that the people who are doing that tend to be like end of career things, and so this is kind of a sign that he has that, which you pretty much just said there, but like that competitive fire is like that option will be there for him down the line. But he might not necessarily be able to come back to this option if he goes and takes that now. I'm guessing he'd burn some bridges if he did that. So it seems like, yeah, definitely the impression I get from him is that it's just like, let me, I think, did you use the word legacy there or something? Like let me take care of my legacy first. Like, let's do that. The things that people are going to remember me for, let's do that. And then if I make bank when I'm like 38 or something down the line fighting like weird little boxing fights, I mean, he has boxing experience, he can do that, no dramas. But that option is there for him down the line. Right now, it's not so much about money as it is about just like, yeah, competitive fire.
And if you look at this card, you've got Mike Mathetha, Blood Diamond, making his debut. You've got Carlos Ulberg in his second fight. If there's niggle between Adesanya and the UFC, that creates a greater issue with Team City Kickboxing, because the way the UFC operate, if there's any niggle, they play dirty and they play petty. And like if there's issues, they will intentionally not promote you. They will all these opportunities that come for the rest of the City Kickboxing stable, for like epitomized by this card, they might not be so open to those opportunities if there is like issues between the UFC and one of their top 3 biggest stars in the UFC. Because the way Eugene Behrman and City Kickboxing have worked their relationship with the UFC is that it's not just about Adesanya. It's not just about Brad Riddell. It's not just about Dan Hooker. It's about the whole City Kickboxing team coming into the UFC and, moving as a unit. So if there's an issue with the biggest star in the UFC or the biggest star in City Kickboxing, the way the UFC operate, those issues can permeate across the rest of the City Kickboxing roster as well. So that's a pretty important note. As far as the fight goes, holy guacamole. Robert Whittaker has been very open and honest about his growth as a man, as a human, as a bloke, as an entity on planet Earth, since losing to Adesanya. And basically the narrative is that like he was like very emotional, and like there was a bit of pressure there, and that played into how he fought Adesanya. And when you think about how that fight played out, Robert Whittaker was very aggressive in moving forward against Adesanya. What did Adesanya do? He just started crumping, caught him with a few counter shots, finished the fight. Funnily enough, also, both fighters are 4-1 in their last 5 fights. So Whittaker's loss was against Adesanya, and he's had 4 wins in his last 5 fights. Adesanya's loss was against Jan Blachowicz, and he's had 4 wins. So both fighters are 4-1 in their last 5 fights, even though we can obviously, offer some clarity around there because Adesanya moved up a weight division to fight Jan Blachowicz. So there's this idea that Robert Whittaker is like a new, improved version of himself. And the type of fighter Robert Whittaker is, that could be a troubling puzzle for Adesanya because Whittaker's got a wide variety of kicks. He's got a wide variety of punches and strikes, as well as decent wrestling to the point where he qualified for the Australian Commonwealth Games wrestling team. And again, the narrative in this fight is that what did Adesanya lack against Jan Blachowicz? It was some grappling strength. It was grappling prowess. And I think that's kind of null and void because Adesanya came in with the same body shape and style as he does for his regular fights. So he went up a weight division, but didn't change anything about his body. So he's fighting a bigger man. So he's like, there's obviously an advantage there for Jan Blachowicz being the bigger man, stronger, more powerful, able to control Adesanya. Marvin Vettori couldn't do that in his last fight. It's kind of dangerous for Robert Whittaker because if he thinks he can just automatically grapple and wrestle with Adesanya, I don't know if that's going to work. So, but Whittaker does have the variety of skills and the execution to definitely pose a severe challenge and threat to Adesanya. So then Fascination Station is all about how does Adesanya, Eugene Beerman, Andre Paulette, some of these coaches at City Kickboxing, how do they go about countering this new version of Robert Whittaker? And it's an epic fight. Like, it's serious. It's not just like, oh my God, Adesanya's fighting, he's from Aotearoa, fantastic. No, this is like a very seriously interesting fight where you have 2 of the straight up best fighters on the UFC roster going at each other. Whittaker does have experience and prowess in an area that has been thrown up as an area for weakness from Adesanya as far as grappling and wrestling goes. They are both, like, Adesanya is ridiculous at striking. He's the best striker in the UFC. Whittaker's pretty good at striking. Adesanya is obviously learning and growing as well. He's got Shoshin mindset, so he's getting better at jiu-jitsu. He's getting better at wrestling, and it's all very interesting. And if Whittaker wins, they can just do a trilogy, which is cool. If Adesanya wins, it's kind of like next man up, and the Robert Whittaker challenge falls in the background because he got to this point with 3 really good wins in a row after losing to Adesanya. He has commanded this opportunity. But if Whittaker loses, there's, you got to kind of move on from that fight.
So where is the fight happening? It's in America, isn't it?
Yeah, Houston.
Right, because the first time they fought was in Australia, right? And that was when they got a massive crowd in. That's sort of, we're talking about legacy before. That fight seems like kind of like the I don't know, like his Rumble in the Jungle kind of thing. And in hindsight, just because of the I don't know what the word would be, just the hype and the interest and the intrigue and the excitement and whatever that had at the time. But I'm not sure if that's just because I'm in this part of the world. Maybe I was just more attuned. Like, is that something like, was the first fight between these two, does that look back on as like a peak Adesanya moment or whatever?
Yes, I believe so, because he was doing the crumping, I think, in the intro. So when you combine that with a spectacular knockout in front of the biggest UFC crowd there's ever been, that's pretty rare territory for like just a moment. a sporting moment like that goes. But that also worked against Whittaker, because he's said a few times, and other people have noted, there's a lot of pressure. And I think I heard an interview with Eugene Behrman where he said he like told Adesanya, like when they were in like those final moments, like when you like see each other in the octagon type of stuff, Eugene Behrman told Adesanya, like, you can see it, right? You can see it. And they were, and like Adesanya's obviously like, yeah, fuck yeah. They were referring to like just the tense nature of Whittaker, the pressure, because Whittaker's fighting in front of his home nation and in front of all his friends and family. Like, that's a lot of pressure. And Adesanya comes out dancing, right? Like, you've got one dude who is under severe pressure and the other dude is dancing in his intro. And that kind of tells the story. And that's where we get into the growth of Robert Whittaker, because he's now fighting in Houston. He's released a lot of that, tension within him, and he just looks more fun, vibrant, easygoing. And that's the massive change from the spectacle that was their first fight.
Beauty. So I'm guessing then this is when was that when was the Ngannou fight? Is this like the first blockbuster of the year, or was that one might have been in January?
It's my first blockbuster.
The first one that matters.
There's still this, like, whether it's boxing, whether it's MMA, there's still this idea of like heavyweight to the golden child. And it's like,
yeah, I know. Yeah.
You don't need to, all you need to do is be a heavyweight who wins, and like everyone's going to love you. Whereas like, so that sets up the Francis Ngannou thing. Like, that's the biggest, easily the big fight to start the year. Adesanya is like a way bigger star. Adesanya is far more culturally relevant than Francis Ngannou. Israel Adesanya is like got brand deals coming out of his ass. Like, his YouTube channel gets like instant views, like instantly hundreds of thousands of views around the world. And but because he's not a heavyweight, there's this idea that he's like, you can't be the biggest star. That's why Conor McGregor was so special, because he was like a smaller dude who could still captivate people the way heavyweights do. And that's what you're seeing in boxing. Like, all the amazing shit is in the heavyweight division. So it's a real thing. Like, it's not like bullshit. Like, it's a real thing. We love to see the biggest people, fighting. Like, like, no one wants to see it. But if you're at school, like, the type of fights you want to see are like the two props, going at each other. Those are the scraps you want to see. You don't want to see two little dudes going at each other. Like, that just gets a bit raggedy. You want to see the two massive dudes who each thinks they're the biggest dude in the school going at each other, and that's the nature. But yeah, I just think Israel Adesanya is like a far bigger star. He's far more relevant, and he is excellent at what he does. So for me, it is kind of the first big monstrous event. But deep on this card, you've got Carlos Ulberg and Mike Mathetha, the Blood Diamonds. So I just want to keep shouting out Mike Mathetha's actual name, because like everywhere he's listed as Blood Diamond. Like, I'm on the UFCstats.com and it's all like official things, and it's Jeremiah Wells versus Blood Diamond. I was like, fuck, like, dude's got a name, Mike Mathetha. Like, it's a fucking actual name. Like, unless he's changed his name to Blood Diamond because he is a quirky dude. He fights Jeremiah Wells, and then that's on the first fight of the card. And then you've got Carlos Ulberg fighting Fabio Charant in the fourth fight of the card. So those should be on the free ESPN prelims section. I think the best way to preview these fights is a package, because they are very similar to Adesanya, given their like King in the Ring history, which is all kickboxing related. So a lot of the stuff that has got them to where they are is based on kickboxing, which is a prototypical city kickboxing recipe, right? Like, a lot of their fighters are kickboxers who then develop a wide range of skills to set them up for MMA. And then from that point, they enter the UFC. And so it's just, you just view them through, you can view them through the same lens of world-class striking, world-class kickboxing. What happens when they are taken down? What happens when they come up against a different skill set? And that kind of didn't work out for Carlos Ulberg in his first UFC fight, which he lost. He got finished in the second round by Kennedy Unchekwu. And that feature, it didn't feature any takedowns, but it did feature 7 out of 8 significant strikes on the ground. And that's a different element from regular kickboxing. Blood Diamond, same spot as we were with Carlos Ulberg last year, where it's like, don't know too much about him. You do know, like, these dudes are winning on the local scene. They have been on the grind. Like, Blood Diamond was living in China with Adesanya. They've all gone through the same grind, and they have a similar skill set. So then it's, how does that skill set look in the UFC when you're coming up against a dude who is a great wrestler, who is a jiu-jitsu practitioner, who has, maybe they have equal striking skills as Ulberg or Blood Diamond, and that puts Adesanya on a pedestal, because Adesanya, his striking is so much superior than any of the dudes he fought in the UFC on his come up. But he's also shown enough like defensive grappling skills to become a champion. Not enough to move up a weight division without adding the actual weight, but his grappling defense, his jiu-jitsu defense, and all those things are good enough for him to be a UFC champion. So then it's, do Blood Diamond and Carlos Ulberg have the similar skills to become factors in the UFC?
Right. And the only other thing I'd have to ask on top of that is, what are the chances of a 3-0 CKB of evening, afternoon, depends which time zone you're in?
No idea, because like there's not a whole lot of information on like the Blood Diamond, Carlos Ulberg, but more importantly, like,
yeah,
you got to get deep into the weeds to actually learn about the dudes they're fighting as well. So
yeah.
those are kind of like wait and see fights. So there's sure, you can start 3-0, like that could happen. That would be, actually, given what happened last year, like, we have to remember last year, 2021, wasn't the most successful year for city kickboxing. Kai Kara-France was the only fighter to win more than one fight. He went 2-0, where like Adesanya had a win and a loss. Like, there was a lot of win, loss, win, 2 losses type of stuff with the other city kickboxing fighters. Oh, and we have to also note just the sheer like mayhem of trying to be city kickboxing, competing in the UFC with the current climate, how tricky everything is. Like, I think these dudes and their staff, coaching staff, are going to struggle to get back into Aotearoa just with all that shit. So we, in the same way, like, I am going to try and write about the Warriors, New Zealand Warriors, tomorrow, and their Tūranga Waiwai to start 2022. Like, if you're talking about the Warriors, you have to understand that they don't have any other teams. Like, we are here in 2022 and they don't have SG Ball. They don't have under 20s or under 21s. They don't have reserve grade. They don't have a Warriors reserve grade team. Yeah, they have Redcliffe Dolphins where players can go through, but that just tells you the Tūranga Waiwai is that the Warriors are in the NRL, and for almost 2 seasons, they don't have any other teams. That's fucking hard to do. That is tricky. That is niggly. That is annoying. Every other NRL team, they've got under 16s, under 18s, under 20s, reserve grade. The Warriors don't. And that is the reality that a lot of people overlook, because they just look at the NRL team and they're like, oh, the Warriors suck. Yeah, well, do you know what they're actually going through? And then we come to city kickboxing, it's the same thing. Like, every time these dudes leave New Zealand, it's a mission to get back to New Zealand. Every time these dudes go for a fight in any corner of the world during a pandemic, they have to have coaches with them. So you might have one coach for a fighter, and then because there's another fight 2 weeks later, you have to split the coaching staff up between the fighters just to, like, get through this process logistically. So don't 2021 was a tricky year for your city kickboxing as far as results go, but the fact that they are here starting 2022 and they have a dude making his UFC debut on this card is similar to the Warriors in that it's really impressive that they just exist in this way, given all the challenges they have to deal with to perform at a world-class level. So city kickboxing and the Warriors, maybe if we just understand the facts and what they have to work through, then we can get just pure admiration for what they are doing.
Which, unless you've got anything else to say on that one, actually segues in extremely tidily to the Wellington Phoenix, who we're going to talk about, I assume, to finish the podcast, where exact same scenario as the Warriors, basically. I mean, there's a little bit different, reserve grades. There's no reserve grade in the A-League. There are other teams have youth teams and stuff like that. I don't know if they're running youth leagues or whatever at the moment. I don't pay any attention to it whatsoever, really, because the Phoenix aren't involved in that. They do have an academy team that plays in the New Zealand National League, who finished their season a month and a half ago. So 2 months ago at this point, pretty much, almost 2 months ago. So those guys are not currently playing, but then also that's a good thing in their own way, because they've pretty much just taken the best players from that squad, 6 or 7 guys. It started with a couple Paulson and Old being given contracts, and then a couple more guys being brought along as what do you call them? They had a word for it, but effectively just as reserve players to hang on in case they need scholarship players, they were calling them. And then they brought some more of those along midway through the Phoenix season, then 1 or 2 others since. I think the kid Gray had gone over to be the third string keeper, Henry Gray. So it's a funny thing, because they've had to because obviously it's tough for them if they have injuries and stuff like that. Because this is why NRL teams need strong reserve grade teams, is because there's a lot of player turnover in that league. Injuries and attrition rates and stuff like that is what it is. So if you got just solid pros you can bring up from your reserve grade, plug and play, sweet as, done deal. The Phoenix have been trying to do that, and playing where they're based in another country, can't come home, difficult to bring in players from outside their little bubble as it is. It's extremely frisky. Their last game, they had to shut the gate things, just shut the game to the public, because they not having home games but still being expected to run to and organize home games in another country, we don't have an existing fan base. They were getting 500 people to a thing. It was costing more to do that than it was for the gate receipts they're actually getting. So they just basically, for their game against Melbourne Victory, were well, we can't have fans. We save more money, and we're in a tricky financial position as it is. We'll save more money by just not having fans, and then not having to do the catering and the gates and the security and all these little things. You can just completely minimize those things to the bare minimum, because you don't have guys who have crowd members who are going to run on the field, like happened in an FA Cup game on the weekend. And amidst all that, they played the first 9 games, whatever it was, of the season. Most of them with only 1 import player available, and they were losing a lot of games, and they were looking poor, and guys that were expected to step up just were playing worse than last year instead of playing better. And depth was being tested because they had a few injuries, and then they're having to call in these academy guys who are just going over to make the numbers. Suddenly Finn Sermon's starting A-League games, and Alex Paulson's getting a run of games, and the whole thing is extremely frisky. And then suddenly, not to mention they had a COVID outbreak in the squad as well in the middle of all this, just to make things as if things weren't tricky enough as it was. Amidst all this, they managed to get through the worst part of that season, where you knew better days were coming, because they had once the transfer window opened, they had already signaled their intent to sign a couple players. bring in Scott Wood and bring in Gail Sandoval. Gary Hooper returns to availability after missing a few games for personal reasons. You actually had some of those academy players really stepping up and looking better than some of the senior contracted players in some of those opportunities. Like Paulson in particular. Paulson is a senior contracted player as a backup keeper, but he'd never played it professionally before. He was excellent, like flawless in his couple games that he was playing while Ollie Sale was out injured. And Sale has come back better than he left off as well, like rising to that challenge. I thought he was outstanding in both the two games he's played back. And what have the Phoenix done amidst all this, like, amidst all these hurdles, amidst all these like handicaps? Like, they're in a worse situation than any other team in the A-League. Like, nobody else is having to deal with, everyone's having to deal with a lot. Like, it's a difficult season to run in general. No one's having to deal with quite as much as the Phoenix are. Ripped off 3 wins in a row, like gone from bottom of the table to right back into the top 6 time. Like, they're just all of a sudden out of nothing. They've just like, and it's not fully out of nothing because it coincides exactly with Gael Sandoval arriving. So get an extra import player. Imports are supposed to be your best player. He comes in, scores on debut. Didn't actually do as much in the win over the Victory, I didn't think. But, you know, just his presence there frees up others. Like, if he's drawing in attention from defense, that will create more room and opportunities for Reno Piscopo, for example, who's scored in the last 2 games, having not scored at all in the season up to that point. Like, all those things you're saying about, like, let's keep the context going about what City Kickboxing are achieving against great handicaps, what the Warriors are achieving against great handicaps, even just by, you know, continuing to exist at all in the way they are. Like, the Wellington Phoenix, 3 wins in a row, finding all this form in a quick hurry, right as they needed it to, when their season was getting a little bit frisky and worrisome. Just an astounding turnaround. And as I say, not coincidental. Like, they've brought in some really talented players to help them, but like, it just flicked the switch as quickly as they did. I think this is a like incredible achievement of what they've done in the last week and a half, not to mention the FFA Cup run to the semi-finals as well. Never done that before. And hopefully it's just the start on the rest of a long season, because when they play, like, it's just been the same thing throughout Ufuk time. When they play well, they can beat anyone in the league. It's just a matter of how consistently they can do it. And they tend to be a team that gets like, when they're out of confidence, they're really out of confidence. They'll lose a bunch of games in a row and struggle to convert chances and things like that. But when they're firing, you know, I think the last season, Telai's first season, they had like a 9-game unbeaten streak at one point. I think the second one, he had like an 11-game unbeaten streak. It's like, if this is the start of another big, long mid-season unbeaten streak, then despite all the troubles at the start of the season, they're right back in the hunt for like, not just finals footy, but like, we could be talking like a top 3 finish or something like that if they actually go on a run like that, converting this good couple weeks of form into something extended over a couple months. And, you know, that's the target. That's the potential outcome of all that.
I was thinking, because I did watch not the most recent game maybe, but the game on the weekend, and I was just thinking, like, it feels like the Blackcaps batting order that we're working through with the test squad. You know, no Kane Williamson, no Ross Taylor. So then it's like, how, like, you're just working through the batting lineup. Like, okay, this is got a lot of good batsmen competing for like 5 spots, maybe, right? Like, yeah, sure, no Kane Williamson, no Ross Taylor, but you got some good test contenders competing for spots. And because I haven't watched much Wellington Phoenix, not my job to, but I did note, like, if you got the Sandoval dude, if you got Piscopo, if you got Soterio, if you got Hooper, Ball, or is he gone?
Yep.
Yeah,
Ball was hanging around. He set up the winner against Melbourne Victory. Fantastic little run after an interception.
Like, these dudes, like that. Now we're dealing with a like Blackcaps batting lineup type of situation where everyone is just good. Right, like there's no necessarily we got to be chilling on this dude because, you know, he's a bit younger, he's playing his first few games, or we've got an injury here and like this dude has to step in. Like, just watching them attack, like Sandoval's on the right, Piscopo's on the left, Soterio's just bursting through everywhere. You know, Hooper and Ball are buzzing around, and then you've got the pretty solid like duo of Lewis and Rufer. There is that you've highlighted this perception of Rufer, and I'm not sure how he's played, but the game I saw, he played pretty well. Like, he was getting turnovers, doing what we know Alex Rufer does. Like, he gets turnovers, shovels the ball along. And I think that's
I'll
just
say a word about that duo after you. Yeah, I've got something to say on them later. So,
fucking hit us with it right now.
Right now, okay. Well, they're just like when the team was struggling, because they like you look at the what do you call them? Like the I don't know, the different lines in their formation. You know, there's the 4-2-2-2. Back four, they've signed Scott Wooden, so they've got an import there. Middle two, Lewis and Rufer continuing on. Attacking two, you got probably first choice would be Piscopo and Sandoval, but Sandoval was signed for that, like the two tens, the two behind the strikers, and David Ball playing in the top two with Gary Hooper, probably ideally. Like imports in every other line along the formation except center midfield. So center midfield is where like there is pressure on those guys to step up and try to deliver to that level. And just the first couple months of the season, they weren't doing that, and they were a little bit iffy as a combination last season as well, where I think Lewis played a lot better when he played next to Cam Devlin, who did, I think Alex Rufer does a similar amount of defensive work to what Cam Devlin would do, just in a very different way. He's not that like bundle of energy bouncing around and just suffocating guys. He's more just like hold your position, be like a firm obstacle at the base of midfield. Which obviously I think the Devlin one is probably harder to play against, and that makes a difference in freeing up Lewis to be to use his ability as like a technical passer and like a creative type player. He's someone who's played further forward a lot in his career. So I think that combination helped a lot more. And then when you send those two play together, and then this season where they're really given the opportunity to be like the two guys from the start, just not really. It's not even that you'd isolate either one of them and say this guy's been absolutely terrible. I mean, I'm sure people have done that throughout the season while they're losing, because fans always lash out when teams are losing. But it's just more that they were both playing a little bit subpar, and then together that makes like you multiply a slight negative by a slight negative, and you get a bigger negative. Or actually, you'd get a positive, wouldn't you, if you're doing algebra? But whatever. But the thing with that is, in theory, there's nothing wrong with that combination. It's not like they have players who are too similar to each other. You know, one's left-footed, one's right-footed, one's big and physical, one's smaller, but, you know, does his physical stuff as well. One's a little bit more defensive-minded, one's a little bit more attacking, but you sort of felt like Rufer was trying to do a bit more of what Lewis wasn't doing, and Lewis was trying to do a bit more of what Rufer wasn't doing, and it wasn't really working. I don't know what's changed other than the fact that their attack has gotten a bit, Watson only made his debut in the victory game. They won 2 in a row before he arrived. So it's not like the defense had suddenly, fixed everything and they could play further forward and be freer or whatever. I don't know. I'm guessing just like, working on the training field, and like, these are the things you got to work on. And they've both finally like sort of started to click. And I think Rufer in particular has been outstanding the last 2 games, just doing the stuff that he should be doing, which is being that physical presence at the base of midfield, but just being a little bit more aggressive about it, rather than waiting for the teams to get to him sitting too deep. He's like getting out and actually like getting stuck in and stuff a bit more. Plus, I think he's moving the ball a lot quicker, and that helps a lot just in terms of being able to shift from defense into attack when you got possession of the ball, like just moving the ball quicker and smarter, and allowing guys to get into positions and whatever. I think Lewis's big switch, and it was different. It had to have been a deliberate thing from Tele, because you saw it like 4 or 5 times throughout the game, where when Josh Soterio plays, he plays because he's a speedy striker who can run in behind high defensive lines normally. Like, he normally plays against teams who have either a back 3 where there's just a bit more space between the center backs and more room for him to work in there, or a high line where he can run in behind. And Lewis was pinging passes over the top from like in his own half and stuff. So it was obviously looking for Soterio really early. And I just thought that's like, this is what we've needed to see from Lewis to begin with throughout the season, is just more expansive passing, like be more ambitious, be like, try to go like from midfield into attack, like get that ball forward nice and quickly. You're good enough to do it. You can hit a beautiful switch right out to someone's feet, no dramas. And yeah, the last couple of games, he started doing that as well. So I think both Rufer and Lewis have started doing the things that they themselves hadn't done enough of. They've been a bit too passive in both those areas earlier on in the season. And now that's not the case anymore. Like now they're doing the things they're expected to do. And that combination looks so much better as a result.
But Clayton Perlo.
So, and then Gattuso Rufer, or
we got Gattuso and Perlo, the Wellington Phoenix duo. To like segue us into the wahine section of the Wellington Phoenix to finish the podcast, what is the identity of the men? Like, how do they? What is like just the summary of their playing identity? Are they like a Barcelona tricky passing team? Are they counter-attacking? Are they like just full pressure? Full court press, turn the ball over, all that shit. Like I actually think individual identity is overrated, because like you are who the fuck you are. Like, just don't cling to like identity. Like for some reason I think back to like health classes in high school or whatever, and it was all about your identity as a person. But those are things we just cling to. Like, fuck my
things that evolve as
yeah,
you
like
get
fuck
older
my individual identity. I'm just a creature that moves through this earth, and I'm not clinging to anything to represent me. I'm just me. But as sports teams, I think identity is quite important because it's something that we can sense, we can feel. Maybe it's more like a mana type of thing, but it's a key indicator that this is how we go about our business on the sports field. And then off the field, you're getting into like culture of organizational culture. So I'm curious, like, what is the Wellington Phoenix men's playing identity? And then what is the wahine identity from games they have been losing? Like, you can still, I think what I'm setting you up to say is there is still a wahine identity evident, even though they have been losing games, and from a outside perspective, like, what are they doing type of stuff. But through their losses, you can see that there is an identity there.
Yeah, I think with the Wahinix, they're actually a way easier, despite being the first season of their existence and everything. I think they're way easier to pinpoint, like certainly like a tactical, strategic identity. I mean, they're a team that that presses high. They're a team that defends on the front foot. It looks to be aggressive at stepping up into challenges. They're well organized at the back, at least until the second, third phase of opportunities come along, and they got to play in broken play. That's just like a lot of goals they've conceded have been from like the second phase stuff. They clear the first header and then the ball gets sent back into the box where everyone's slightly out of position from the first action, and a lot of goals conceded that way. But that's just pure inexperience and not like having played at a level, any of those defenders really, where things like the pressure stays on so swiftly. Like from one, you've cleared the ball, nothing stops, like straight back into it. That'll come with experience, as I say. But like, yeah, they're trying to play out from the back as well. With the way, like everything they do seems to have intent, and like you can see the hours of repetitions on the training field and through the games they've played as well, which is why you get like progress from game to game. You can see all that coming through, where they're doing the same stuff they're doing in week one. It's getting more and more successful. I'll drop a bombshell idea about them at the end of the podcast as well. We'll come back around to that. But the men's team, I think it's harder to pinpoint like a strategic thing, because they're not, like, normally when people do that, it's the thing that you are the most extreme at, like the old day, like Barcelona Pep Guardiola era was just like extremely high pressy and tiki-taka stuff. Like those are the things that they did more than anyone else to a higher volume. That becomes their identity, along with all the Barcelona like La Masia stuff and whatever. But I don't know that Ufuk Talai's Phoenix have a thing that they do to an extreme like that. They're not they'll put pressure on up front, but they're not really a high pressing team. But they're also not a team that sits too deeply or anything like that. They like to play in possession. They like to bring their fullbacks into the play going forward. They like to get crosses into the area. They like to try get in behind the defense when someone like Soterio is playing, but none of those things do they do excessively. They're kind of a team that does a lot of things really well and nothing like extremely, nothing to the extreme. But at the same time, like, you always tend to see a really well-motivated team. I talked about they can be like they can have brittle confidence when they're out of form and stuff. That's a little bit different. That's not, that's like sort of, that's a different kind of second guessing in terms of like they're going out there and try. Like often when a team is low on confidence, the problem is they try too hard is one of the issues you get. Like guys trying to play the perfect pass a couple passes before it should be played and just like not having the patience and whatever. But they always seem like an extremely well-drilled team under Tele, and they are adaptable. Like I say, like they can play games where they know they're going to have to be trying to counterattack but they also play games where they know they're going to be trying to keep position a lot more. They tend to adapt a lot to their opposition in that thing. A lot of this all comes down to Ufuk Talay as well. I think he's a great motivator. He's a very good tactician. He's very good at, I mean, a little bit skeptical about his in-game substitution sometimes, but I think that he generally sets the team up really well. And he knows what he's doing and he knows what he wants his team to do. And they tend to go out there to show that. So I don't know if that's an identity or not, but that's the impression I get of them anyway.
What is Mark Rudin doing? Like, how do you reflect on those two coaches?
Well, Mark Rudin definitely did have an identity. He was more of a like defense first, counter-attacking set pieces, and also a great motivator.
But what's he doing now? Like, what is he winning games? Like, is he still coaching? Like, what's?
Well, he got sacked by Western United,
right?
And no, he just got rehired by Western Sydney Wanderers, didn't he? I think it was. Or was it Newcastle Jets? Or someone else just hired him again. He got sacked in like bridges burning, fire everywhere kind of way by Western United, who had left the Phoenix after a successful-ish season. Successful-ish, I say, because it was successful at the time, but they've gone on to be better under Talay since then, so it doesn't look as flash in hindsight, but it was an important transitional year for the team. He then left Western United after a year or two. I can't remember how, whatever, but it wasn't pretty. There was a lot of complaints about maybe he wasn't the easiest to work with, and he's a bit of a because there was some talk about this after he left the Phoenix, that maybe he was a bit like, if you fell out with him, not so much in the squad he was working with, but like I think he's had some dramas off the field with media folk and stuff. It's probably best not to get into some of that stuff, but if you search Mark Rudin on Twitter, give him a quick Google, you can find some scandals. But yeah, it didn't seem like he was going to bounce back in a hurry. But yeah, as you mentioned that, I'm reminded that he did actually, like a week or so ago, pop back up. I forget which team. It might have been one of them anyway. I'll look it up. But yeah, he's back in the A-League now. That'll be fun when the Phoenix come up against him next.
Well, the main point there is that we'd rather have Ufuk Talay. Like, is that clear?
Yeah, and that was clear like halfway through Talay's first season as well. That Rudin was good at getting the team motivated and organized, and not very good maybe at the tactical stuff of turning that like positive spirited performances into wins. They got them to he got sixth place in finals, but Talay took them further and actually made it look like he had Western Sydney Wanderers is where he is now. Like Talay took this team further into where it feels like they can actually beat the best teams. Under Rudin, they were very good at putting away teams that were worse for them and losing to better teams. Talay's got them being like, they can beat anyone on their day kind of thing. Because he's a better tactician, because he's a smarter like footballer mind and an organizer and things like that. It's not a coincidence.
Trying to think of like other sport, like maybe a bit more Gary Stead than Bob Carter.
Well, I mean, they win some games, so
Yeah, so he's Gary Stead. Yeah.
so it's Gary Stead, right? Yeah.
What's your Wahinex take that you alluded to? Drop a bomb.
So they play Friday night, I think it is. So tomorrow night, away to Canberra United. They've lost 8 games on the trot after getting the draw in their first game, but they have been more promising in recent weeks. My big bombshell prediction is that I think they're going to beat Canberra United. I'm putting this one on the calendar as their first win of the season. We'll see how that goes. I had a very similar feeling, which I didn't publicize, around the Perth game. I just like I couldn't pinpoint it. It wasn't like I've done my stat research and I feel that, or I've been scouting the opposition and I feel like, because Perth have been getting some decent results. I don't know, something about that game. I just had a vibe, I just had a feeling, an intuition, an instinct. It felt like that was the game that they were going to win. 2-1 up with 10 minutes to go, ended up losing 3-2. So it didn't quite work out, but they were close. It's as close as they've come to winning. And I have that same feeling about this Canberra game. And Canberra's not been great. They've been, pretty poor, to be honest, this season. They're definitely a team where you look at the fixtures and be like, this is as winnable of a game as it's going to get. And I think they will win. I think they will win this game. And I had the feeling watching them play Melbourne Victory, where I actually thought like they lost to Victory, but I actually thought like, if it wasn't for Claudia Bunch at centre back for the Victory, I think they might have won. She was like 10 out of 10 good, just shutting down the compatriots, which is like real mixed emotions when that's going on. Like a Kiwi footballer being outstanding, but also like crushing a few other Kiwi footballers in the process. But that was their last really tricky game, I think, looking at the fixtures. Like they've got 4 games left, starting with this Canberra game. And they're all games that are like potentially winnable if everything clicks. I think they'll win 2 of their last 4 games. I don't think just one win throughout the rest of the season is enough. I think they've come close enough. And the way they've continued to learn lessons, I think the next time they get a 2-1 lead with 10 minutes to go, I think they're in a much better place to close that out now. And that's my prediction. I think they're going to beat Canberra, and then I think they're going to win one of their other 3 games as well over the rest of the season.
2 things to follow up before we wrap this up. The Claudia Bunge, Kiwi, and as you said, like
in the current football Ferns squad,
battling against her compatriots. The thing that came to mind there was Kiwi on Kiwi crime, but it's not. It's Kia on Kakapo, right? Like it's like Kiwi on Tui. It's those type. It's native bird of Aotearoa versus native bird of Aotearoa, which we don't want to see, because they're all native birds of Aotearoa and they're all beautiful and they all add something to Aotearoa. But sometimes in the bush, this shit happens. Shit gets frisky and you get a little Kia versus Kakapo 1 ounce UFC style. It happens.
There's only so many berries to go around, is there?
Damn Skippy. The other thing is Super Bowl is coming up this weekend. Is there like a possibility that the Wahinex are a bit like the Bengals? Don't win too many games in the regular season, but do just enough to get into finals footy, playoffs, obviously, and then they get to the Super Bowl. Is that like, because I'm kind of taking your win over Canberra thing a couple steps further, and like, is there a situation where the Wahinex can go from losing every game to actually competing and then stumbling into finals footy? Like, is that even in the realm of possibility?
I haven't considered it, and I think they probably need to win 4 in a row for that to be a chance. But I think it is like a top 6. I'm going to change the finals format to a top 6, and because it's gone from 9 teams to 10 teams this season with the Phoenix, and the idea is that they'll be adding like Central Coast and I think Western United next year to go to 12 teams. So they just expanded the finals a year earlier. Been like, well, who cares? This is the new format. We might as well start now as any time. On the table, they have 1 point, and 6th place is Newcastle, who have played 2 fewer games but have 9 points. They can't catch anything higher than that because Perth have 15. So probably not. I don't think that's a it's definitely not realistic, but even on like the dreamscape of things, they play Canberra, Adelaide, Western Sydney, and Perth. Canberra, Adelaide are quite good. Adelaide have won 6 of their 9 games, but Western Sydney are also outside of that. You know, Canberra and Western Sydney are the 2 lowest teams above them on the table, and Perth they almost beat a couple of weeks ago. So, no, they're not going to make the playoffs and do a Joe Burrow's Bengals or anything like that. But, you know, winning a couple games over the rest of the season would feel like that, even if they don't get a finals game out of it. It would feel like that big kind of finale, finishing with a flurry and showing everybody what you're capable of, giving you something to build off of next season as well, confidence going into that. You know, it'd be close. They're not going to make the finals, so.
Hey, anything's possible, you know. Get a bit of emptiness, get into the potential, infinite possibilities. You know, we've got to empty ourselves first, though, because you're coming in with all this other information, well, not information, like facts about the W League. There's you got to get a bit of emptiness there. Just release all the facts and deal with infinite possibility, as I need to do with the white fans with the World Cup. You know,
well, as we got to do for any sport. Just quickly, who are you picking out of Rams and Bengals?
The Bengals, for sure.
I'm picking Rams. So,
like, obviously, I don't give a fuck. So, whatever the coolest story and the coolest dude is, and Joe Burrow's the coolest dude, and they've got the coolest story.
I like a bit of Matt Stafford. I think he was putting up crazy numbers for years in terrible Detroit teams. And now, like, the first year he's on a decent team, he's taken them to the Super Bowl. I love that story too.
Is there an NRL equivalent of Matt Stafford?
Who was the last Warriors player to go to the Melbourne Storm? You think
they don't go that way? They don't go that way. They only go the other way. It's a one-way street.
Reverse Tohu Harris. I don't know. Like, if he'd been at the Warriors his whole career and then went to the Storm and immediately won a bunch of premierships, then look his career and rewind, then maybe that works. I don't know. There must be someone.
Sean Johnson didn't win anything with the Cronulla Sharks, but there is a bit of that.
There was.
Sean Johnson with the Warriors is a bit like Matthew Stafford with the Detroit Lions, and then, you know, maybe Matthew Stafford goes back to Detroit and me fucking Sean Johnson goes back to the Warriors.
Well, I mean, if it's not Kiwi-NRL, but it's Warriors, like guys like James Maloney or Chad Townsend sort of spring to mind, and similar you guys who got to start with the Warriors, but it's not quite the same Kiwi-NRL band. So
all good. Beautiful podcast. Great podcast there. We'll wrap it up. Stay tuned tomorrow. Email banger day. I've written the preview for Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker. I will also preview the Blood Diamond and Carlos Ulberg fights, and I'll also do that Warriors Turanga YY for 2022 yarn. Any yarns that you've got coming up there, Wildcard?
We'll write about the Phoenix men and their mid-season revival, the annual mid-season revival, and probably a few of these ideas as to why, like what's changed, how did they get good all of a sudden, seemingly. Most of which we just talked about here, but that'll be a nice companion piece. And I try to get a Stephen Adams thing out this week. If not this week, then early next week. But we'll see how that goes. That's just a little bit sneaky with NBA stuff because trade deadlines. And actually, if Sean Marks does anything crazy at the deadline, I will also probably write about that situation. Other than that, email and podcasts.
Cowabunga. Stay beautiful, raise your mana. Bit of moldy order and kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Cheers.